The gravel driveway crunched softly beneath your tires as you turned off the county road, and there it was, just as you remembered it. The old farmhouse stood at the end of the lane, its white clapboard siding glowing amber in the late afternoon sun. You hadn't been back in years, not since your grandmother had passed, and the sight of it now made something loosen in your chest, a tightness you hadn't realized you'd been carrying. You pulled the car to a stop near the front porch and sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel, taking it all in. The house looked smaller somehow, the way childhood places always do when you return as an adult, but it was still beautiful. The wraparound porch with its swing still hanging from chains, the window boxes now overgrown with wildflowers instead of the neat petunias your grandmother had always tended, the screen door that had slammed 1,000 times behind you during endless summer visits. Behind the house, stretching up the gentle slope of the hill, was the orchard. Even from here, you could see the rows of apple trees, their branches heavy with late summer fruit. The leaves rustled in the breeze, creating a sound like gentle waves, like whispered conversations in a language just beyond understanding. You stepped out of the car and breathed in deeply. The air here was different than in the city. Cleaner, somehow, sweeter. It carried the scent of warm grass and ripening apples, of earth and growing things. A bee drifted past, heavy with pollen, moving with the slow certainty of a creature that knows exactly where it belongs. The lawyer's letter was still in your bag, the one that had brought you here. Your grandmother had left you the property, all 20 acres of it, including the orchard that had been in your family for 4 generations. You'd been surprised. You'd expected it to go to your uncle, or perhaps to be sold, the proceeds divided among the relatives. But no, she'd left it to you with only a short note attached. For the one who always listened. You'd puzzled over that phrase during the long drive from the city. Listened to what? To her stories? You'd loved those, certainly, the tales she'd tell while the two of you sat on the porch swing in the evening, watching the fireflies emerge. Stories about the orchard, about her own childhood here, about the land and the seasons and the quiet magic of watching things grow. The front door key was where your grandmother had always kept a spare, under the 3rd flower pot from the left. Your hand found it without thinking, muscle memory from decades ago. The lock turned smoothly, and the door swung open with a familiar creak that echoed through the empty house. Inside, everything was neat and clean. Someone, probably your aunt, had been keeping the place up. Dust covers draped the furniture like sleeping ghosts, and the air held that particular stillness of a house waiting to be lived in again. You walked through slowly, your footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The kitchen still had your grandmother's old table, scarred and worn from years of use. The counter where she'd rolled out endless pie crusts. The window over the sink that looked out toward the orchard. You stood there for a long moment, watching the afternoon light slant through the apple trees, painting everything in shades of gold and green. In the living room, the old grandfather clock stood silent, its pendulum still. On the mantel above the fireplace, photographs tracked the years, your great-grandparents standing stiffly in their Sunday best, your grandmother as a young woman with victory rolls in her hair, your mother as a little girl in overalls, and you, gapped gold-toothed and grinning, holding up an apple almost as big as your head. You found yourself drawn to the back door, the one that led to the mudroom and out to the orchard beyond. Through the window, you could see the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and something in you yearned to be out there among them. The mudroom smelled of earth and old work boots. Your grandmother's gardening jacket still hung on its peg, faded denim soft with wear. Without thinking, you put it on. It was too small, of course, but you left it unbuttoned, and somehow wearing it made you feel less alone in the quiet house. You stepped outside onto the back porch, and the evening wrapped around you like a blanket. The sun was lower now, beginning its slow descent toward the horizon. The light had taken on that particular quality of late summer afternoons, thick and golden as honey, making everything it touched seem precious and fleeting. A path led from the porch up into the orchard, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. You followed it without deciding to, your feet knowing the way. The grass on either side was long and wild, dotted with clover and dandelions gone to seed. Grasshoppers sprang away from your steps, their wings catching the light. As you entered the orchard proper, the temperature dropped a few degrees, the air beneath the trees cooler and more still. The apple trees rose around you in orderly rows, planted long ago by your great-grandfather. They were old trees, gnarled and thick-trunked, but still producing. The branches above your head were laden with fruit in various stages of ripeness, from small and green to full and red and ready for picking. You reached up and touched one of the apples, felt its weight in your palm. It was warm from the sun, and its skin was smooth except for a few freckles near the stem. You gave it a gentle twist, and it came away easily, as if it had been waiting for you. The first bite was crisp and sweet, and filled your mouth with a taste of summer. Juice ran down your chin, and you laughed, feeling suddenly, absurdly happy. When was the last time you'd eaten an apple straight from the tree? When was the last time you'd tasted anything this real? You walked deeper into the orchard, eating your apple, letting the peace of the place seep into your bones. Birds called from the branches above, settling in for the evening. Somewhere in the distance, a dove was cooing its three-note song. The light was turning richer now, more amber, painting the tree trunks and the grass between the rows and shades of gold. At the top of the hill, where the orchard leveled out before sloping down the other side, you found the old bench. It was still there, weathered gray by years of sun and rain, positioned to look out over the trees and, beyond them, the patchwork of fields and farms that spread out toward the horizon. Your grandmother's bench. How many evenings had she sat here, watching the sunset over her beloved orchard? You sat down, and the wood was warm beneath you. From here, you could see the whole property. The house below, looking even smaller from this vantage point. The barn with its faded red paint. The garden plot now overgrown, and everywhere trees. Apple trees in their patient rows, oak trees marking the property line, the distant windbreak of pines your grandfather had planted before you were born. The sun was touching the horizon now, and the whole world seemed to hold its breath. The colors were deepening, the gold turning to orange, to pink, to shades of purple and blue. A breeze moved through the orchard, making the leaves whisper their secrets. And in that sound, you thought you could almost hear your grandmother's voice, welcoming you home. You sat on the bench as the light faded, feeling the day's tension draining away, replaced by something else. Peace, maybe, or belonging. The orchard was waiting, patient as it had always been. And you, finally, had come home to listen. You woke to birdsong and golden light streaming through unfamiliar windows, and for a moment, you couldn't remember where you were. Then it came back in a rush. The farmhouse, the orchard, the decision you'd made last night while sitting on that bench, watching the stars emerge. You were staying. Not forever, maybe. You still had loose ends to tie up in the city, a lease to break, a job to quit. But you were staying long enough to figure out what to do with this place. Long enough to understand why your grandmother had left it to you. Long enough to listen, whatever that meant. The bedroom you'd chosen was the one you'd always slept in as a child during summer visits. It faced east, catching the morning sun, and the wallpaper was still the same. Tiny sprigs of flowers on a cream background, faded now to softness. You lay there for a moment, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams, listening to the house settle and creak around you. Outside, the world was waking up. You could hear a rooster crowing from a neighboring farm, the sound carrying clear across the fields. Closer, there was the busy chirping of sparrows in the eaves, and beneath it all, a constant soft rustling that you realized was the sound of the orchard, the leaves moving in the morning breeze. You got up and dressed in clothes more suitable for farm work than your yesterday's travel outfit. Old jeans you'd found in a closet, a soft flannel shirt, sturdy boots. In the kitchen, you made coffee in your grandmother's percolator, watching through the window as the sun climbed higher, burning off the thin mist that lay over the low places. The coffee was strong and hot, and you took it outside, mug cupped in both hands, steam rising into the cool morning air. The grass was heavy with dew, soaking your boots as you walked toward the orchard. Spiderwebs stretched between the plants, made visible by the moisture, each one a perfect geometric miracle strung with diamonds of water. In daylight, you could see the orchard more clearly, could assess its condition with eyes unclouded by nostalgia or evening's soft focus. The trees were old but healthy, their bark thick and textured, their branches well-shaped from years of careful pruning. The fruit was abundant, maybe more than you'd realized last night. The ground between the rows was overgrown, knee-high grass and wildflowers, and the occasional volunteer apple tree sprouting from a dropped seed. It would need work, a lot of work. The grass should be mowed, the fallen fruit cleared away before it attracted too many wasps. Some of the trees probably needed pruning, and all of them would need to be picked soon, before the apples got overripe or the first frost came. The thought was daunting, but also surprisingly exciting. When was the last time you'd worked with your hands? Really worked, not just typed on a keyboard or signed papers or sat in meetings. When was the last time you'd made something, grown something, tended something? You walked through the rows, sipping your coffee, examining the trees one by one. Each one was slightly different, you realized. This one had a twist in its trunk, as if it had fought against some long-ago wind. That one had a low branch, perfect for climbing. This one here was older than the others, gnarled and thick, covered in lichens and moss on its north side. Near the center of the orchard, you found a tree that made you stop and stare. It was larger than the others, and older, with a trunk so thick you couldn't have gotten your arms around it. But what caught your attention was the apples. They were different from the others, smaller and more golden, with a blush of pink on their sun-facing sides. You picked one and bit into it, and the taste made you close your eyes. It was perfect. Sweet, but with a hint of tartness, crisp and juicy, with a flavor somehow richer and more complex than any of the other trees. This must be it, you thought. The original tree. The one your great-grandfather had planted when he first bought this land. The one from which all the others had been propagated. You'd heard stories about it, but you'd thought it would be dead by now, or at least stopped producing. But here it was, still bearing fruit, still generous with its gifts after all these years. You stood beneath its branches, looking up through the canopy of leaves at the blue sky beyond, and felt a connection to something larger than yourself. Your great-grandfather had stood here, had touched this same rough bark. Your grandmother had picked apples from these branches, had probably climbed them as a girl, and now you, another link in the chain, holding fruit that was both gift and responsibility. A voice interrupted your reverie. You must be Sarah. You turned, startled, to find an old man standing at the edge of the orchard, one hand raised in greeting. He was lean and weathered, dressed in work clothes that had seen better days, a battered baseball cap shading his eyes. "I'm Tom Brennan," he said, walking toward you between the rows, "from the farm next door. Your grandmother and I were friends. I've been keeping an eye on the place since she passed." You introduced yourself, shaking his calloused hand, grateful for the kindness of neighbors. "Thought you could use some help," Tom said, looking around the orchard with an appraising eye. "Picking season's coming on. These trees are heavy with fruit. Be ashamed to let it go to waste." You admitted you'd been thinking the same thing, but you had no idea where to start. Tom smiled. "Well, that's where I come in. I've been picking apples for 60 years. Could do it in my sleep. And I know some folks who'd be happy to help if you're amenable. Harvest's a community effort around here. Always has been." The idea warmed you, the thought of not having to do this alone. You told him yes, you'd be grateful for the help. "Good," Tom said. "I'll spread the word. We'll start this weekend if the weather holds. But in the meantime, there's other work to do. Come on, I'll show you what's what. And so began your education. Tom walked you through the orchard, pointing out things you'd never have noticed on your own. He showed you how to tell if an apple was ready to pick by the way it came away from the branch, how to spot signs of disease or pest damage, which trees would ripen first and which would hold their fruit well into October. He showed you the old barn where your grandfather had stored equipment, where wooden crates for apples were stacked in a dusty corner, and where an ancient tractor sat under a tarp, waiting. He showed you the root cellar, cool and dark, perfect for storing apples through the winter. He showed you the compost pile behind the barn, now overgrown, and explained how your grandmother had always returned to the soil what she took from it. The morning passed in a blur of information, and your head was spinning by the time Tom finally tipped his cap and headed back to his own property, promising to return with a mower to cut the orchard grass. You spent the rest of the day exploring, familiarizing yourself with the property, taking stock of what you had. It was overwhelming and exhilarating in equal measure. By evening, you were exhausted, your boots muddy, your hands dirty, muscles you'd forgotten you had making themselves known. But as you sat on the back porch, watching the sunset, a simple dinner of eggs and toast beside you, you felt something you hadn't felt in years. Useful, needed, connected to something real and growing and alive. The orchard stretched up the hill before you, its trees dark silhouettes against the orange sky. A few early stars were appearing overhead. The air was cooling, carrying the scent of apples and earth and the promise of harvest. Tomorrow, you thought, you'd start calling people in the city, beginning the process of untangling yourself from your old life. But tonight, you were here, and that was enough. You sat on the porch as the light faded, listening to the evening sounds, crickets tuning up their nightly symphony, a distant dog barking, the soft sigh of wind through apple leaves. You were beginning to understand what your grandmother had meant. Listening wasn't just hearing. It was paying attention. It was being present. It was opening yourself to the world and letting it speak to you in its own language of seasons and growth and quiet persistence. The orchard had so much to teach you, and you, finally, were ready to learn. The days took on a pattern, a rhythm as natural as breathing. You woke with the sun, coffee, and birdsong, then out to the orchard to walk the rows, examining the trees, learning their individual personalities. This one always held its fruit longer. That one was prone to dropping apples early. This one here attracted more birds, its branches a favorite perch for cardinals and blue jays. Tom came by most mornings, bringing tools and knowledge. He taught you to use the push mower, an ancient reel mower that was surprisingly satisfying, the soft whir of its blades and the smell of fresh-cut grass marking your progress through the rows. He showed you how to prune the smaller branches, how to clear away the suckers that grew from the base of the trunks, how to thin the fruit in areas where the branches were overburdened. On the third day, his wife Martha arrived with lunch, thick sandwiches, homemade pickles, and still warm oatmeal cookies. She was round and cheerful, with bright eyes that missed nothing. "Sarah," she said, settling herself on the bench at the top of the hill while you ate, "your grandmother talked about you all the time. She was so proud of you, you know. Your career, your life in the city." You paused, surprised. You'd always felt guilty about the visits you'd promised and never made. The phone calls that grew further apart. Martha seemed to read your mind. She understood, she said gently. She knew you had to make your own way, but she always said you'd come back when the time was right. She said you were like her in that way. You needed to leave so you could choose to return. The words sat with you as you worked that afternoon, offered a kind of absolution you hadn't known you needed. Your grandmother had understood. She'd always understood. The evenings became your favorite time. After dinner, you'd walk up to the bench at the top of the orchard and sit as the sun set. Sometimes you'd bring a book, but mostly you just watched and listened. The quality of the light at that hour was extraordinary, turning everything golden and soft, smoothing away the sharp edges of the day. You began to notice small things, the way the light moved through the orchard as the season progressed, changing angle and color, the individual songs of different birds, the patterns of butterflies visiting the wild flowers between the rows, the way the leaves on the trees shifted from deep green to something lighter, touched with the first hints of yellow that meant Autumn was coming. At night, you slept deeply, dreamlessly, in a way you hadn't since childhood. The silence of the country had been jarring at first, too quiet after years of city noise. But you quickly came to appreciate it, to understand that it wasn't silence at all, but a different kind of sound. The creak of old wood, the rustle of leaves, the distant yip of coyotes, the hoot of owls hunting in the darkness. More neighbors began to stop by. Mrs. Chen from down the road brought vegetables from her garden, tomatoes still warm from the sun, cucumbers, peppers. The Kowalski boys, high school students home for summer's end, came asking if you needed help with any heavy work. They helped you clear fallen branches, move equipment, organize the barn. Each visitor brought stories about your grandmother, painting a picture of her life here that you'd never fully seen. How she'd organized the annual county fair. How she'd taught half the county's children to make apple pie. How her orchard had supplied fruit for the local food bank every year, boxes and boxes of apples for families who needed them. You were beginning to understand the responsibility you'd inherited. This wasn't just land and trees. It was a legacy, a connection to the community, a promise made and kept generation after generation. On Friday, Tom arrived with news. "We'll start picking tomorrow morning," he said. "I've got 15 people lined up to help. We'll bring ladders and baskets. You just need to have some water and maybe some snacks ready. Martha's making lemonade." That night, you could barely sleep, nervous excitement keeping you awake. You lay in bed listening to the house, to the orchard beyond, wondering if you were ready for this, wondering if you knew enough, could do enough, would be enough. But when morning came, when you walked out onto the back porch with the first light and saw the orchard waiting, patient and generous, heavy with fruit, you felt a calm settle over you. You didn't have to have all the answers. You just had to show up. You just had to do the work. You just had to honor what had been left in your care. The sun rose, painting the world in gold and green, and you stood on the porch in your grandmother's old jacket, watching the light spill across the trees, and whispered a prayer of gratitude to the morning, to the land, to the woman who had known you well enough to know this was what you needed. Today, the harvest would begin. They arrived with the morning, cars and trucks pulling up the gravel drive, doors slamming, voices calling greetings. Tom came first, his truck bed loaded with wooden ladders of various heights. Behind him came Martha with her promised lemonade in a cooler so large it took 2 people to lift it. Then the Kowalskis, all 5 of them, and Mrs. Chen with her grandson, the Methodist minister, Pastor James, and his wife, 2 women from the local historical society, a young couple who just bought the old Johnson place down the road. You stood on the porch, overwhelmed by the sight of so many people here to help. Here because your grandmother had been part of this community, and now you were too, whether you were ready or not. Tom took charge with the easy authority of someone who'd done this many times before. He divided people into teams, assigned sections of the orchard, showed the newcomers how to pick properly, twist and lift, don't pull, fill the baskets gently, don't toss, start with the lowest fruit, work your way up. And then, with a kind of ceremony, he turned to you. "Sarah, you should pick the first apple. It's tradition." You walked into the orchard, everyone following, and approached the old tree, the original, the grandmother of all these others. Tom handed you a basket, and you reached up to the nearest apple, golden and perfect. You remembered what he'd taught you. Twist gently, lift, feel it release from the branch. It came away into your hand with that satisfying sense of rightness, of fruit ready and willing to be gathered. You held it up, and everyone cheered, and you laughed, feeling both foolish and moved by this simple ritual. Now, Tom said, let's get to work. The orchard came alive with activity. People climbed ladders, moved through rows, called out to each other. The sound of apples dropping gently into baskets provided a constant rhythm. Conversations flowed, punctuated by laughter. Children who'd come with their parents ran between the trees, playing games that had probably been played in this orchard for 100 years. You worked alongside them, learning as you went. Martha showed you how to spot apples that were too damaged to sell, but perfect for cider or sauce. One of the historical society women, whose name was Eleanor, told you stories about apple harvests of the past, when this would have been an all-day affair with a dance in the barn afterward. We should bring that back, she said thoughtfully, examining an apple for blemishes. Your grandmother hosted the last one about 10 years ago. She said she was getting too old for that much dancing. The work was hard, but satisfying. Your arms ached from reaching, from carrying full baskets down to where the Kowalski boys were loading them into a truck. Your back protested the constant bending and stretching, but there was a joy in it, in the simple honesty of physical work, in seeing the tangible results of your efforts as basket after basket filled with fruit. Around noon, Martha called everyone to stop for lunch. She'd brought sandwiches, dozens of them, and there was her lemonade, tart and sweet and ice cold. People sprawled under the trees, eating and talking and resting. You sat with Tom and Martha, too tired and happy to say much, just listening to the conversations around you. Good crop this year, someone said. Best I've seen in ages. That's the old ways, Tom replied. Sarah's grandmother, she understood the trees. Never pushed them too hard. Let them rest when they needed to. Pruned them right. The trees remember that kind of care. After lunch, as people returned to picking, Pastor James fell into step beside you. He was a quiet man with gentle eyes and hands that looked more accustomed to manual labor than most ministers. Your grandmother used to say the orchard was her church, he told you. She said she felt closer to God here than anywhere else. I never took offense. I understood what she meant. There's something sacred about growing things, about this kind of work. It's all about faith, really. You plant, you tend, you wait, and you trust. Trust that the seasons will turn, that the rain will come, that the tree will do what it was meant to do. You thought about that as you worked through the afternoon. Faith, trust, the long patience of watching things grow. It was so different from your old life, where everything was fast and urgent and measured in quarterly reports. Here, time moved differently. A tree planted today might not bear fruit for 5 years, but in 30 years, it would still be producing, still generous, feeding people not yet born. The sun was low when Tom finally called an end to the day's work. The truck was loaded, stacked high with crates of apples. Tomorrow, he explained, some would go to the farmer's market, some to the local grocery, some to the food bank, continuing your grandmother's tradition, and some would stay here for you to sell at the farm stand you'd talked about setting up at the end of the drive. People packed up their things slowly, reluctant to leave. Several mentioned they'd be back next weekend to help finish the harvest. Mrs. Chen promised to teach you her apple chutney recipe. Eleanor invited you to join the Historical Society, said they met Tuesday evenings at the library. As the last car pulled away, Tom and Martha stayed behind to help you carry supplies back to the barn. You did good today, Tom said simply. Your grandmother would be proud. Martha hugged you, smelling of lemongrass and sunshine. You're one of us now, she said, whether you meant to be or not. After they left, you walked back up into the orchard. The trees looked different now, lighter, many of their branches cleared of fruit. But there was still so much more to pick, days of work ahead. The thought didn't daunt you anymore. You were ready for it. You sat on the bench as the evening drew in, your muscles aching in that good way that comes from honest work. The light was doing its evening magic, turning everything soft and golden. A breeze moved through the orchard, and the remaining apples swayed on their branches. You thought about Pastor James's words, faith and trust. You'd spent so many years trying to control everything, to plan and manage and force outcomes. But here, control was an illusion. You could tend and care and work hard, but ultimately, you had to trust. Trust the trees, the seasons, the ancient rhythm of growth and harvest and rest. The first stars were appearing when you finally headed back to the house. You were dirty and exhausted and happy in a way you'd almost forgotten was possible. Tomorrow, you'd wake up sore, and there would be 100 things to do. But tonight, you had done enough. You had shown up. You had worked. You had been part of something larger than yourself. The orchard had welcomed you into its rhythm, and you, finally, had learned to listen to its song. September eased into October, and the world turned gold. The leaves on the apple trees shifted from green to yellow, touched here and there with orange and red. In the mornings, the grass was white with frost that melted into diamonds as the sun rose. The air took on that particular clarity that comes with autumn, sharp and clean, and carrying the scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys. The harvest continued every weekend, your team of volunteers returning faithfully. You'd fallen into your role with surprising ease, learning to coordinate the work, to spot which trees were ready, to make the 100 small decisions that shaped each day. Tom still guided you, but with an increasingly lighter touch, stepping back to let you find your own way. The farm stand at the end of the drive had been your idea, a simple wooden structure that the Kowalski boys helped you build. You painted a sign, Orchard Fresh Apples, Honor System. Every morning you'd stock it with crates of fruit and a metal box for money. Every evening you'd find the box heavier, often with small notes tucked inside. Thank you. Best apples ever. Your grandmother would be proud. The notes became a treasure, evidence that you were maintaining something valuable, contributing something good to this small corner of the world. One particularly beautiful afternoon, Eleanor from the Historical Society arrived with an ancient-looking book under her arm. You were on the porch, taking a rare break, and she settled into the rocking chair beside you with a satisfied sigh. "I've been doing some research," she said, opening the book carefully. It was a journal, you realized. The pages yellowed, and covered in careful handwriting. This belonged to your great-grandfather. We have it in the Historical Society archives. I thought you might like to see it. Your hand shook slightly as you took the book. The first entry was dated 1924, the year your great-grandfather had bought this land. His handwriting was precise, almost architectural. Planted 50 apple trees today, mixture of varieties, Macintosh, Northern Spy, Golden Delicious. The land here is good, slopes just right for drainage. In 5 years, God willing, we'll have our first real harvest. In 20, these trees will be the legacy I leave my children. You turned the pages carefully, reading entries that spanned decades, records of plantings and harvests, of weather and yields, but also more personal things. His joy when his daughter, your grandmother, was born. His pride the first time she helped with the harvest, age 5, more hindrance than help but earnest in her efforts. His grief when his wife died young, and his gratitude that the orchard gave him a reason to keep going. The final entry was from 1968. Taught my granddaughter, little Sarah, to pick apples today. She's only 3, but already she understands to be gentle with the fruit. She sat under the old tree for an hour, talking to it, telling it stories. The tree is lonely, Grandpa, she said. Some people are just born knowing how to listen to growing things. You looked up at Eleanor, your eyes bright with tears. I don't remember that, you whispered. I was too young. But the tree remembers, Eleanor said softly, and the land remembers. And now you're here, listening again. That evening, you sat under the old tree, the original, and tried to recapture that memory. Your hand on the rough bark, you closed your eyes and let yourself be present, really present, in a way you'd forgotten how to be during your years in the city. The tree was solid under your hand, ancient and patient. You could feel, or imagined you could feel, the slow pulse of its life, the sap moving through its vessels, the roots reaching deep into the earth. It had stood here for 100 years, through droughts and floods, through heat waves and ice storms. It had fed your family for 4 generations. And it was still here, still generous, still giving. Thank you, you whispered to it. Thank you for waiting. The days grew shorter. By 6 o'clock now the sun was setting, and you'd made a ritual of watching it from your bench at the top of the orchard. The light in October was different from September, more horizontal, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. The leaves were falling now, drifting down in gentle spirals, carpeting the ground between the rows in gold. Tom announced that the final harvest day would be the last Saturday in October. After that, any remaining fruit would be left for the deer and the birds, nature's share. Martha declared that they should revive the harvest dance tradition, and before you quite knew what was happening, it had been decided, a party in the barn, the Saturday after the final harvest, with music and food, and the whole community invited. You spent the week preparing, cleaning out the barn, stringing lights, worrying about 100 details. Martha kept telling you to relax, that these things had a way of working themselves out. But you wanted it to be perfect, wanted to honor your grandmother's memory, wanted to thank all these people who'd welcomed you so completely into their lives. The final harvest day was crisp and clear, the sky that impossible blue that only comes in autumn. Everyone worked with a kind of urgency now, racing against the season. By mid-afternoon, The last apple had been picked, the last crate filled and loaded. Tom stood in the center of the orchard and raised his voice. "That's it, folks. Another harvest in the books. Well done, everyone." Then, turning to you, "Well done, Sarah. You've honored your grandmother's legacy. This orchard, it's in good hands." The praise made you uncomfortable in the way that true, earned recognition always does. But it also settled something in you, a question you'd been carrying since that first day. Did you belong here? Could you do this? The answer, you now knew, was yes. The barn had never looked so beautiful. The bare bulbs you'd strung created pools of warm light in the rafters. Someone had brought in hay bales for seating, and Martha had covered tables in checked cloths and loaded them with food, pies and cider and fresh bread, venison stew and roasted vegetables, and apples, of course, prepared every way imaginable. People began arriving as the sun set, bringing dishes to share, bottles of wine, instruments. The Kowalski boys had set up a small stage area at one end of the barn. Pastor James arrived with his fiddle, and Mrs. Chen's grandson had brought his guitar. A woman you'd never met unpacked a banjo and began tuning it with casual expertise. The barn filled with people and talk and laughter. Children ran between the hay bales, their shouts echoing in the rafters. Someone had brought their elderly mother in a wheelchair, and she held court from her spot near the food, telling stories about harvest dances from 70 years ago. You moved through the crowd, overwhelmed by gratitude. These people, most of whom had been strangers just 2 months ago, now felt like family. They'd welcomed you, taught you, worked alongside you, and asked for nothing in return except that you care for the land as your grandmother had. Tom found you near the cider table and pressed a cup into your hand. "Your grandmother always started the dance," he said. "I think you should say a few words, at least." The thought terrified you, but before you could protest, he was tapping a spoon against a glass, calling for attention. The conversations died down, and suddenly everyone was looking at you, expectant and kind. You cleared your throat, feeling your face flush. "I'm not much for speeches," you began, and there was warm laughter. "But I wanted to thank you all. When I came here 2 months ago, I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't, really. But you've all been so patient with me, so generous with your time and knowledge. This harvest, this whole season, it wouldn't have been possible without you." You paused, looking around at the faces lit by the warm glow of the lights. "My grandmother left me this place, and at first I didn't understand why. But now I think I do. She knew that land like this isn't really something you own. You're just a steward for a while, part of a long chain of people caring for it, making sure it stays healthy and productive for the next generation. She was teaching me that responsibility isn't a burden, it's a gift. And community isn't something you have, it's something you build, harvest after harvest, year after year." Your voice caught slightly. "So, thank you for welcoming me, for teaching me, for helping me understand what my grandmother already knew, that the real harvest isn't just apples, it's this. All of us together taking care of each other and the land we share." There was a moment of silence, and then applause, warm and genuine. Martha was wiping her eyes. Tom nodded at you with satisfaction, as if you'd passed some final test. Then Pastor James lifted his fiddle, someone counted off, and the music started. It was old-time music, the kind that had been played in barns like this for generations. Fiddle and banjo and guitar, someone keeping rhythm with a washboard and thimbles. The sound filled the barn, lively and bright, and people began to dance. Not formal dancing, not choreographed, but the kind of dancing that's all joy and movement, partners swinging each other in circles, children weaving between the adults, everyone clapping and stomping and laughing. You found yourself pulled into it, passed from partner to partner, spinning until you were dizzy and breathless and happier than you could remember being. Between dances, people came up to talk. Eleanor from the Historical Society mentioned she'd found more journals if you wanted to read them. The young couple from down the road asked advice about starting their own small orchard. Mrs. Chen insisted you come to dinner next week, wouldn't take no for an answer. As the evening wore on, the energy shifted from wild to warm. The fast dances gave way to slower ones. Couples swayed together, and older folks sat on the hay bales, tapping their feet, smiling at memories. Children curled up in their parents' laps, fighting sleep. You stepped outside for a moment, needing air and quiet after so much noise and activity. The night was cold and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. From inside the barn, the music drifted out, muffled and sweet. You could see the orchard, dark shapes against the starlit sky, the trees that had brought all these people together. Beautiful, isn't it? You turned to find an old woman you didn't recognize, wrapped in a thick shawl, leaning on a cane. Her face was weathered like tree bark, her eyes bright and sharp. "I'm Rose," she said. "I used to live on the property that borders yours to the north. Moved to town 10 years ago when my husband passed. But I still come back for important occasions." You introduced yourself, and she nodded as if she already knew. "I remember when your great-grandfather planted this orchard," Rose said, gazing toward the trees. "I was just a girl, but I remember. Everyone said he was crazy, planting that many trees, spending money he didn't have on what was basically a bet against the future. But he believed. He had faith that if he did the work, if he cared for those trees, they'd take care of his family in return. And they have, haven't they? 4 generations now." She turned to look at you directly. Your grandmother, she had that same faith. She believed in slow things, patient things. She used to say that the orchard taught her everything she needed to know about life. You do the work, you trust the process, and you share the harvest. Simple as that. "I'm trying to learn that," you said softly. Rose smiled. "You're doing fine. I can see it in the trees. They look content. Trees know when they're being cared for properly. They respond to it." She patted your arm with a hand that was all bone and tenderness. "You'll do right by this place. I can tell. You've got the listening gift, same as your grandmother." She made her way back inside, and you stood there a while longer, thinking about her words. The listening gift. It seemed such a small thing, but maybe it was everything. Maybe that's all any of us could do. Pay attention, care deeply, do the work, and trust. The party wound down slowly. Families with young children left first, then others in 1s and 2s. People helped clean up, insisted on doing the dishes, wrapped up leftover food for you to keep. Tom and Martha were among the last to leave. "Same time next year?" Tom asked. And you nodded, knowing now that you would be here, that this was home. After everyone had gone, you walked through the barn, turning off lights, noticing the small signs of the evening, a forgotten sweater on a hay bale, a child's drawing of the orchard left on a table, the lingering scent of cider and wood smoke and community. You locked the barn and walked up through the orchard, not ready yet to go inside, to let this perfect day end. The trees were dark silhouettes, but you could feel their presence, patient and permanent. Your feet found the path without needing light, knowing the way, now by heart. At the bench, you sat and looked up at the stars. The Milky Way was visible, a river of light across the darkness. Somewhere, an owl called, hunting. The wind moved through the bare branches with a sound like whispered secrets. You thought about everything that had happened since you'd arrived. The work, the learning, the slow settling into this life. You thought about your grandmother, about the gift she'd given you. Not just land and trees, but this, a chance to be part of something larger than yourself, to care for something that would outlast you, to build something worth passing on. In the city, you'd been successful by every conventional measure, but you'd also been lonely in a way you hadn't quite admitted to yourself. Busy, but not fulfilled. Connected digitally, but isolated actually. Moving fast, but going nowhere that mattered. Here, in this quiet place, tending these patient trees, you'd found something you hadn't even known you'd lost. Purpose, meaning, a sense of your place in the long chain of human effort and care. The cold was seeping through your jacket, but you sat a little longer, reluctant to leave this moment. Tomorrow would bring new work. The trees would need winter care, pruning and protecting. There were plans to make for next season, equipment to maintain, 100 details to manage. But tonight, right now, there was just this, the stars, the trees, the quiet satisfaction of a harvest completed and shared. Finally, you stood and made your way back down the hill. The house waited, warm and welcoming, lights glowing in the windows. Your house now, your home. As you reached the back porch, you looked back one more time at the orchard, and you could have sworn you felt something, a sense of rightness, of approval, of welcome. The trees, patient as always, standing watch in the darkness. Good night, you whispered to them. Thank you. The wind rustled through their branches, a sound that might have been an answer, might have been a blessing, might have been simply the song the orchard always sang to those who knew how to listen. You went inside, ready for sleep, ready for dreams, ready for whatever came next. The orchard would be there in the morning, as it had been for 100 years, as it would be for 100 more. And you would be there too, listening. November brought rain, long gray days when the sky and earth seemed to blend into one another. The last leaves fell from the apple trees, leaving them bare and stark, their branches etched against the clouds like careful drawings. The orchard took on a different kind of beauty now, austere and honest, all pretense stripped away. You spent the rainy days inside, going through your grandmother's papers, reading the journals Eleanor had brought you, learning the history of the land in careful, handwritten records. Your great-grandfather's voice emerged from the pages, practical, devout, deeply connected to the rhythms of the seasons. One entry from the winter of 1931 stopped you cold. The Depression has hit everyone hard, many losing their farms, their homes, but the orchard keeps producing. We share what we can, Yesterday gave away 3 crates of stored apples to families in town. It isn't much, but an apple is something. An apple is hope. An apple says, the earth is still generous, still providing, still worth tending. You found yourself thinking about that a lot. The earth is still generous. Even in hard times, especially in hard times, the orchard had been a source of sustenance and hope. Your grandmother had continued that tradition, and now it was your responsibility to carry it forward. On the first Monday in November, you drove into town with a truck bed full of apples from the root cellar and delivered them to the food bank. The director, a tired-looking woman named Susan, nearly cried when she saw them. Your grandmother never missed a month, she said, helping you unload. Even last winter, when she was so sick, she still managed to get someone to bring apples. You don't know what this means to families. Fresh fruit, especially in winter, it's luxury. You promised to keep the deliveries coming, and you meant it. The orchard had enough, more than enough. Sharing wasn't charity, it was stewardship. It was understanding that the harvest belonged to everyone. The rainy days gave you time to plan. You sketched ideas for the spring, expanding the farm stand, maybe adding other products. Tom had mentioned you could make cider in the barn, press your own apples. Eleanor had suggested giving tours, teaching people about the orchard's history. The young couple down the road wanted to learn grafting, to start their own trees from your stock. But you also learned the value of winter's rest. Not every day needed to be productive. Not every moment needed to be planned. Sometimes you just sat in the kitchen with tea and a book, watching the rain, letting your mind wander and settle. Sometimes you walked the orchard in the drizzle, checking the trees, but mostly just being present with them in their dormancy. Tom came by less frequently now, but still regular, always with something to teach. He showed you how to prune properly, how to shape the trees for maximum health and production. You learned to read the branches, to understand which ones to remove and which to keep, to see the tree not as it was, but as it would be, come spring. Pruning looks like you're hurting the tree, Tom explained, watching you make a careful cut. But really, you're helping it. You're removing what's dead or diseased, what's growing in the wrong direction, what's taking resources without giving anything back. Sometimes removing is caring for. You thought about that in terms of your own life. How much had you carried that was dead weight? How many relationships, obligations, habits had you maintained simply because they'd always been there, not because they served any purpose? Coming here had been a kind of pruning, cutting away the old life to make room for new growth. December arrived with the first real cold snap. You woke one morning to find the world transformed, every surface covered in a thick frost that glittered like diamond dust in the sun. The orchard looked enchanted, each bare branch outlined in white, the grass stiff and sparkling. You bundled up and walked through it, your breath clouding in the air, your boots crunching on frozen ground. The cold was sharp but clean, invigorating. It made you feel alive, awake, present in your body in a way the temperature-controlled life of the city never had. At the old tree, you stopped and placed your hand on its trunk. It was cold to the touch, the bark rough under your gloved fingers. The tree stood patient in its winter sleep, its roots deep in the frozen earth, waiting. In a few months, when the soil warmed, when the days lengthened, it would wake again. Buds would form, then leaves, then blossoms. The whole miracle would begin again. But for now, it rested. And that was right. That was necessary. You couldn't have harvest without rest. You couldn't have growth without dormancy. The cycles were essential, each season serving its purpose. Martha invited you for Christmas dinner, wouldn't hear of you spending it alone. Their house was full of children and grandchildren, warm and chaotic and welcoming. You brought pies made from your apples, and Martha declared them the best she'd ever tasted, which made you glow with pride. After dinner, sitting by their fireplace with coffee and the last slice of pie, Tom asked about your plans. Were you staying? Really staying? Or just for the year? "I'm staying," you said, and as you said it, you felt the truth of it settle in your bones. This is home now. I don't want to be anywhere else. Martha reached over and squeezed your hand, her eyes bright with emotion. "Your grandmother knew," she said softly. "She told me once, years ago, that you'd come back when you were ready. She said you had to go away to understand what you were coming back to. She was a wise woman." On Christmas night, back at the farmhouse, you sat by your own fire and thought about the year that was ending. How much had changed, how much you had changed. The person who'd driven up that gravel driveway in August felt like a stranger now. That person had been lost, though they hadn't known it. Successful, but purposeless. Busy, but unfulfilled. This person, the one you were becoming, was different. Quieter, more patient, more connected to the land, to the community, to the slow and sacred work of caring for growing things. You had calluses on your hands now, and a wardrobe full of work clothes. You knew the names of birds and the schedules of seasons. You understood, in a way you never had before, what it meant to be part of something larger than yourself. The old year slipped away, and a new one arrived, marked by nothing more dramatic than the turn of a calendar page. You spent New Year's Eve alone, which would have felt sad in your old life, but felt right now. You walked the orchard at midnight, under stars so bright and numerous they seemed impossible, and you made promises to the trees and to yourself, to care well, to learn constantly, to share generously, to honor what had been entrusted to you. January brought snow, soft and steady, covering the orchard in white silence. You kept the feeders full for the birds, scattered seed for the deer, made sure the path to the barn stayed clear. The work was different now, maintenance rather than production. But it was still necessary, still important. On quiet evenings, you began writing your own journal, continuing the tradition your great-grandfather had started. You recorded temperatures and snowfall, tasks completed, and plans for spring. But you also wrote about what you were learning, what the orchard was teaching you about patience and faith, and the long, slow work of building a life worth living. One entry, written on a particularly cold evening in late January. "Today, I understood something. This isn't about apples. It never was. The apples are just the excuse, the framework. What this is really about is learning to care for something beyond yourself, to think in timescales longer than your own life, to be part of a chain of human effort that stretches backward and forward beyond what you can see. The orchard teaches you to be humble because it reminds you that you're just a temporary steward. But it also teaches you that your time matters, that what you do in your brief season of care will ripple outward in ways you can't predict. The trees I tend today will feed people 50 years from now. The trees my great-grandfather planted are feeding people today. That's legacy. That's meaning. That's enough. February was the hardest month, the darkest, when winter felt endless and spring seemed like a myth. But even then, if you looked closely, you could see signs: the lengthening days, the buds swelling ever so slightly on the branches, the way the light changed, becoming less harsh, more promising. Tom came by on a bright February afternoon and walked the orchard with you, checking the trees, assessing what needed to be done before spring. "You've done well," he said finally. "Better than well. These trees, they look content. That's the only word for it. They know they're being cared for right." You asked him how he could tell, and he smiled. 40 years of looking. You learn to see it. The way the bark looks, the structure of the branches, even the way the tree stands. A tree that's cared for holds itself different than one that's neglected. It's subtle, but it's there. As you walked back to the house, he added, almost as an afterthought, "Your grandmother, she tried to teach me that listening gift she had. I never quite got it the way she did, but I think you have. I think she knew you did. That's why she left you this place." After he left, you stood on the back porch, looking out at the orchard. The trees stood bare and patient in their rows, waiting for spring, confident it would come. They'd been through countless winters, would go through countless more. They didn't worry or doubt. They simply did what they were made to do. Rest when it was time to rest. Grow when it was time to grow. Give when it was time to give. And you were learning to do the same, learning to trust the seasons, both the orchard's and your own. Learning that sometimes the best thing you could do was simply wait with patience and faith for the next right thing to reveal itself. The winter light was fading, painting the snow in shades of blue and lavender. You went inside and lit a fire, made tea, settled in for the evening. Outside, the orchard waited. Inside, you rested. And that was enough. That was everything. March arrived with the kind of weather that can't make up its mind. Snow one day, sunshine the next, the world caught between winter and spring. But the light was changing unmistakably now, gaining strength and warmth, reaching a little further each day. The first sign of spring came on a sunny morning in mid-March. You were walking the orchard, as had become your habit, checking for winter damage, looking for signs of disease or pest infestation. And there, on the south-facing side of the old tree, you saw it, the faintest hint of green. The buds were swelling, preparing to burst open. You stood there, marveling at it. This tiny miracle that happened every year had happened every year for 100 years, would happen every year for years to come. Life returning. The patient trees rewarding another winter's wait. Over the next weeks, you watched the transformation with an attention that bordered on obsession. The buds swelled larger, took on color. Then, one warm afternoon, they began to open. First a few, then more, until the branches were hazed with green, that pale, tender green that only comes in early spring. Tom arrived to help with the spring pruning, and together you worked through the rows, shaping the trees, removing dead wood, opening up the canopies to let in light and air. It was satisfying work, creative in its way. You were sculpting living things, partnering with them to help them be their best selves. Good pruning is an act of love, Tom said, stepping back to survey a tree you just finished. You're not just cutting. You're thinking about what this tree needs to thrive. You're thinking 3, 5, 10 years ahead. You're helping it become what it's meant to be. Eleanor came by with more journals, these ones from your grandmother's own hand. Reading them at night became your meditation, your connection across time to the woman who'd walked these same paths, tended these same trees. One entry from 40 years ago spoke to you across the decades. Spring always fills me with hope, even in difficult years. There's something about watching the trees wake up, seeing that first green, that reminds me why we do this work. It's not for us, not really, or not only for us. It's for everyone who comes after. Every tree I plant, every tree I tend, is a gift to the future. Sometimes I think that's the only real legacy we leave. The things we cared for, the things we kept alive, the things we passed on better than we found them. As March turned to April, the orchard exploded into bloom. It happened over the course of just a few days, as if the trees had been holding their breath and suddenly released it all at once. One morning, the branches were green with leaves, and the next, they were covered in blossoms, white and pink and impossibly delicate. The air filled with the scent of them, sweet and clean. Bees appeared from everywhere, drawn by the promise of nectar, their hum a constant presence. You spent hours just sitting in the orchard, watching the bees work, watching the petals drift down like snow when the wind blew. People started stopping by again, drawn by the beauty. Families with cameras, elderly couples holding hands, artists wanting to paint the trees. You welcomed them all, shared the beauty freely. The orchard in bloom wasn't something to hoard. It was a gift meant to be shared. Martha organized a blossom viewing party, inviting everyone who'd helped with the harvest. People came with picnic baskets and blankets, spreading out under the trees, eating and talking, and simply being present in the beauty of it. Children ran through the rows, petals catching in their hair. The Kowalski boys brought a guitar and played folk songs while the sun set and the blossoms glowed in the fading light. Tom pulled you aside at one point, his eyes serious. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I'm getting old. Next harvest might be my last doing the heavy work. But I've been thinking, you don't need me anymore. Not the way you did. You've learned well. You've got the knowledge and the feel for it. The orchard's in good hands." The thought of Tom stepping back frightened you, but you also knew it was right. This was the natural order of things. The old generation teaching the new, then stepping aside to let them lead. You hugged him, this man who'd been your teacher and guide, and thanked him for everything he'd given you. "I'll still be around," he said, smiling. "Can't keep me away from these trees entirely. But it's your orchard now, Sarah, truly yours." As the blossoms faded and the petals fell, tiny green fruits began to appear where the flowers had been. You watched them grow day by day, marveling at the transformation. In a few months, these tiny nubs would be full-sized apples, and the cycle would begin again. May brought longer days and warm evenings. You hired the Kowalski boys for the summer, teaching them the work as Tom had taught you. You showed them how to thin the fruit, removing some so the others could grow larger. You taught them about pest management and irrigation, about the balance required to keep an orchard healthy. They were good students, earnest and hard-working. Watching them learn, you understood for the first time what Tom had felt, teaching you. This was how knowledge survived, passed hand to hand, generation to generation, kept alive through the act of sharing. You started offering weekend tours of the orchard, small groups who wanted to learn about apple growing, about the history of the place, about sustainable agriculture. You found you had a gift for teaching, for making people care about trees and soil and the long patient work of stewardship. Eleanor convinced you to speak at the Historical Society about your great-grandfather's journals. You stood in front of 30 people, more nervous than you'd been since arriving, and talked about the history of the orchard, about the dreams and struggles of the man who'd planted it, about the legacy that had been passed down through the years. After the talk, a young woman approached you. She was in her 20s, dressed in city clothes that looked expensive and uncomfortable. "I'm thinking about quitting my job," she said quietly, "buying some land, maybe starting an orchard. But I don't know if I'm brave enough or crazy enough." You smiled, remembering your own doubts just months ago. "It's both," you told her, "brave and crazy. But it's also the best thing I've ever done. If you want, come visit. I'll show you what it really involves, the good and the hard. Then you can make an informed decision." She came the next weekend and spent the whole day with you, asking questions, getting her hands dirty, experiencing the reality of the work. You didn't romanticize it, didn't hide the challenges, but you also didn't hide the rewards, the satisfaction, the connection, the sense of purpose. "I'll think about it," she said when she left. But her eyes were bright with possibility, and you had a feeling you'd see her again. June brought the long golden days of early summer. The fruit was sizing up nicely, still green, but taking shape, full of promise. You spent your evenings on the porch, watching the fireflies emerge, listening to the night sounds, feeling deeply and profoundly content. One evening, Martha came by with something in her hand, a small wooden box, old and worn. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," she said, sitting beside you on the porch swing. "She gave it to me before she passed, said to give it to you when the time was right. I think the time is right." Inside the box were seeds, dozens of them carefully saved, each one in a small envelope labeled in your grandmother's handwriting. Apple seeds from the old tree, saved year after year. She wanted you to plant some, Martha explained. Start some new trees. She said every generation should plant something that will outlive them. She said it's how we make peace with our own mortality, by creating things that will continue without us. You held the seeds carefully, these tiny packages of potential, of life waiting to happen. You thought about the old tree, 100 years old and still producing. These seeds could become trees that would live another 100 years, feeding people you would never meet, in a world you could only imagine. "I'll plant them," you promised. "In the fall, I'll start a new section of the orchard, something for the next generation." Martha patted your hand, her eyes wet. She knew you'd understand. She knew you were the right one. As the evening deepened and Martha left, you sat with the seeds in your lap, watching the orchard fade into twilight. The trees stood patient in their rows, full of growing fruit, full of promise. Your trees now, your responsibility, your legacy. The wind moved through the branches, carrying the scent of green and growing things, and you breathed it in deeply, filling your lungs with this place, this moment, this life you had chosen and that had chosen you. Tomorrow would bring new work. The summer would be busy, the harvest would come again, the cycles would continue. But tonight, you had these seeds, these promises of the future, and you had the knowledge that you were exactly where you were meant to be, doing exactly what you were meant to do. The orchard had taught you to listen, and in listening, you had found your way home, not just to a place, but to yourself, to a way of living that felt true and right and whole. The stars were emerging overhead, one by one, patient as apple trees. You stayed on the porch a long time, watching them appear, counting them like blessings, feeling the deep peace of a day well lived and a future full of promise. The orchard waited as it always had, as it always would, and you were learning to wait with it, to trust the seasons, to believe in growth and harvest and the generous, patient wisdom of living things. In the darkness, the trees whispered their secrets to the wind, and you finally, truly knew how to listen.